Sue, we're here on Zoom today just having a chat about how to give presentations virtually, because obviously nowadays everybody is doing virtual presentations rather than face-to-face. And we've done quite a lot of training with people on virtual presentations over the last couple of months. So just want to ask you first, what are the key differences between giving a virtual presentation and one face-to-face in a conference or a meeting?
It's interesting, Annie, because I think in a way, having done quite a few courses now, there's actually more similarities than differences. One of the things I think particularly that I thought at first was that the energy wouldn't come through on a virtual session, but actually it does. You can feel the energy coming from the presenter. I mean, actually that's really important, because I think a lot of people find it quite hard to keep their energy up when they're presenting virtually. The other big difference obviously is around body language, because for most people what we're actually seeing is heads and shoulders. So that is a big difference. And in terms of training, obviously you can't do as much around sort of body language, although it is obviously really important in terms of presentation skills.
So when you've been talking to people on our training courses, what are the main challenges that you're finding they're encountering with giving virtual presentations?
Still some technology challenges, Annie. I kind of thought that by now we would have ironed out most of the technology glitches, but they still happen. So very much it's about making sure that you have tested the actual software that you're going to be using, because there's lots of different ones. And what I'm finding more and more, people are saying actually it's really, really good to have a wingman when you're doing these things, because actually there's a lot of things to think about when you're presenting. So actually it's a really good idea to have somebody that can do the polls for you, or can, run the questions and those sorts of things. So the technology is still, I think people are getting better, but it's about practice and rehearsal. I think the other challenge is around keeping the interest up. I was chatting to somebody the other day, and she says, well, what I do is when I get bored, I put myself into gallery, or I put the people into gallery view and have a look at what everybody else is doing in the room. I think people's attention spans have been getting shorter for years because of technology. But I think it is that thing about attention spans and people's ability to sort of tune in. So again, that comes back to, being really animated, and also having plenty of breaks. Giving people breaks is really important in virtual presentations. Don't make them too long.
Any others? What about question handling?
That's a very good one, actually, Annie, because question handling is quite different unless you're used to handling questions in a really big conference, where nowadays people have all the electronic support. Typically in your normal presentation, people are saying to the room, has anybody got any questions? And that actually doesn't work very well in virtual, because people are much less comfortable stepping up and asking questions. So you have to be a little bit more orchestrated about how you ask questions, and actually invite people in, or start with very easy questions, so it's easier for people. It's easier for people to actually answer the questions.
Given that, Sue, what techniques do you advise people to develop that can help them do this well?
There's lots of techniques, Annie, and whenever I start a training course, I always ask people for what they want, and there's a whole myriad of things that people say that they want. Managing nerves still comes up, so on and so forth. But I think for me the two biggest tips are planning and rehearsal. I always talk to people about rehearsal when I'm doing real presentation skills, and this is absolutely no different. It's really important to get feedback from the people who are on the receiving end of this, because you're seeing yourself, you're not seeing it how other people see it, and that goes for the technology and the person. I think the other the other tip for me, and it goes back to I think what I was talking about before, is about maintaining your energy, and in particular your vocal energy. Because when you're talking over a set of PowerPoints, it's really, really important that you make your voice clear, you make your voice passionate, and you keep up that vocal energy. I call it harnessing your inner Gruffalo, because it's the voice that, without being patronizing, you use when you're talking to children. You make it more interesting vocally.
Good tip, harness your inner Gruffalo. And that's presumably something that we cover when we do virtual presentation training courses. So can you give an insight into the kind of things that people will do if they come on one of our courses?
Well, it depends, Annie, to be honest, whether we're talking about a webinar, which is more of a listening and a little bit of an engagement experience, where we run through the different elements of a presentation, starting from planning, looking at engagement, looking at body language, voice, visual aids, handling questions. We talk about some ideas and principles, and then we give people an opportunity, if we've got the time, for them to talk in smaller groups about how that would apply to their own presentations. With the coaching, it's much more around, I guess, working with people to help them actually assess where they're at with their skills, giving them feedback. So typically we'd have 2 or 3 people on a coaching program. So we'd be sharing feedback with a view that I guess people can really identify their strengths, because people aren't always very good at identifying their strengths as presenters, but also picking up on the 2 or 3 things that are really going to make a difference. So it's about nudging them forward from where they are now to wherever is the next stage for them. And that will be very different for different people, because obviously, you know, we teach people right from kind of beginners to senior execs.
Great. Thanks very much, Sue. Final thought. What's your one takeaway? What's the one takeaway you would want people to know about giving a virtual presentation?
That's a very good question, Annie. I think try to see it as similar as possible to the normal, because the more you try to think of it as different, the harder it makes it. So focus on I always say to people, focus on what's worked well in the past and kind of carry on doing that with a few tweaks.
Great. Thank you very much indeed.